Hey everyone, today I want to talk about three different distributions of Linux. Um, Briefly going over Fedora again, which you see here, talking about one of the distributions branching off of Fedora, mainly Korora, and Manjaro, which is branched off of Arch Linux. So I actually did kind of go over Fedora beforehand. Don't know if I mentioned it in that first video, but Fedora actually is, that's Linus Torvalds' baby right there. He still uses it to this day, I understand. But I'm not going to spend too much time here on Fedora. It, I'm not overly certain what was changed in this new major update, other than the wallpaper. Um, I mean, it still functions quite well. I'm getting used to this rather, I guess, sparse desktop environment. Um, because again, if you're starting out in Linux and you know you install the operating system and boom, this is what you get. You're like, and but functionally as an operating system, I quite like it. I'm getting used to working with it, and it's just one of these. Oh, go away! This is the thing about working with a virtual machine. Sometimes Windows 10 will interrupt like that. But anyways, here's I mean, Fedora. One of the biggest things about Fedora is that um, there are certain differences to the kernel. It works like the way it handles packages. It uses RPM, and for a long time it was using Yum, which yes, I do have to go and get my little handy dandy reference guide here. Yum, which stands for Yellow Dog Updater Modified. But ever since version, I don't know, 20 or 22, it has gone to DNF for its package management. So I'm going to move along to Korora, which is, like I said, it's another branch off of Fedora, and if you're coming from Windows and want to go to something Fedora based, Korora is probably your best bet. So let us move along to there. Okay, so here we have Korora, which is a distribution based off of Fedora with obviously a different desktop environment. The thing with Korora is it looks like it's trying to hit a middle ground between the way Fedora is and a little bit like Ubuntu in a way, but also making it more appealing to Windows users who are making the jump into Linux. And it does this, of course, with a menu bar or a menu button that gets you to all of your apps. I've actually been using this a bit, and it's nice. Again, it's good because there is a certain familiarity, and having this particular panel, I just call it like my quick bar, because if these are things that I use a lot, I can put them in there and just there I am. I don't have to go searching for them. Again, very much like Fedora, there's the top panel, and instead of flooding the entire screen with a bunch of icons for your apps, you have this nice familiar looking window. And just showing you here, Korora is just chock full of applications, and I appreciate that. I really do like that. I think that's a good thing. One thing, of course, um, with this being on a virtual machine, it's not like I really can do anything game-wise, due to certain limitations of virtual machines. I suppose if I had a computer with more than 8 gigs of RAM, I don't know, I might be able to do something with it, but there you go. Either way, it's a good, solid operating system. It's a really good Linux distro. And for me, coming off of Windows, yeah, I think it's pretty good. Again, since it's based off of Fedora, it uses DNF for its package management. You of course have your quick access to your terminal. That I actually like, because I'm trying to keep myself using the terminal as much as I can, even though I'm still somewhat lost in here. I guess I just don't have the memory like I used to when I was younger. So finally in this video, we're going to check out Manjaro, which is a distribution based on Arch Linux. I don't actually have Arch Linux on my virtual machine, but I'd like to talk about this in some fashion. So, on to Manjaro. So finally, here we are at Manjaro, which is a distribution based on Arch Linux. Arch Linux is another one of these, I call them main distributions, from which other distributions like Manjaro, which we're looking at here, is derived from. I must confess, Arch Linux is probably one of those things I never heard of it. I had for years. I've heard of Debian, I've heard of Fedora, heard of Ubuntu, heard of Red Hat, for crying out loud. But until I started getting into Linux, I had never heard of Arch Linux. Arch Linux, of course, it is based upon the Linux kernel, but its package management system is very much different. It uses what's called Pacman. Though, to be honest, when I'm doing my updates, I try to keep it in the GUI. I know. It's like, dude, you want to learn about Linux? You got to get into the terminal. Sometimes it's a pain in the butt. And I've also learned through experience a couple of, there are a couple of distributions that when you update through the terminal, it just causes all sorts of havoc for the GUI. So this was a very interesting thing, is Octopi. I don't know if you can actually see it down, or could see it down there, but it says there are 452 updates available on Octopi. There's a reason for this. I was attempting to bring up Manjaro, which I had recently updated, and for whatever reason it just refused to boot up, just would not load. So I had to go back to the last screenshot, or excuse me, the last snapshot, actually, in the virtual machine, and there we go. Right back to here, and I'm going to be updating like crazy after this video is recorded. But this is another distribution I would say is good for people transitioning from Windows to Linux. Again, it has a panel at the bottom / taskbar, user stuff on the left, system stuff on the right, and of course the application launcher. I'm using the KDE desktop environment for this, and there's actually a reason. There's a story that goes behind that. When I originally got my hands on Manjaro, I had gotten a copy using the Cinnamon desktop environment. I can't even begin to tell you how many problems I had trying desperately to, just run the thing, with any amount of stability. Every time I tried to update, it would, constantly tell me that there was a dependency missing or something else was missing, something was needed. It can't update past a certain point. It was just horrible. So I started searching for other distributions of Manjaro, and I happened to see Manjaro KDE, which is what I'm using right now, and I have not had a single problem with it. Not with updating or anything. Up until today, trying to load this, the most recent version in. But that's going to be a project for me this weekend, I suppose, to find out just what happened and why. So, again, it's got a very familiar feel for soon-to-be ex-Windows users. You actually have to sort of click your way through the menu. Unlike some distributions, it does not, by default, just throw all your apps at you when you mouse over them. That's a small complaint. It really doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, I guess. Comes with the console terminal. It also comes with Xterm and UXterm. The file that uses the Dolphin file manager. Now, here's something I found interesting. I actually kind of like this. There is something here which is called, of all things, it is called Yakuaki. At least that's how I think it's pronounced. I call it fairly unique because instead of having to search through for your terminal window and blah blah blah, you actually have a drop-down terminal called Yakuaki. So press F12 to use it. Okay, F12. Ta-da! And I actually like that because it makes it so much easier than having to freaking if you haven't maneuvered things around, if you haven't tweaked up your environment or tweaked up the operating system to allow you quicker access to the terminal if needed, you can just hit F12 and boom, there you go. You have a terminal that just drops right down, and it functions every bit as good as any other terminal access. So yeah, I rather like Manjaro. I say that about a lot of the distributions. There are certain things I don't like about certain distributions, but this one so far really there hasn't been much for me to complain about. So I'm gonna leave that here, and next one I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to leave that here. In the next video I'm going to do in this series about Linux, I'm going to talk about Debian and several of their distributions. And I really am working on trying to make these videos a little more compact and not blather on. So I hope you're enjoying the series. So if you'd like to comment below. And like, share, and subscribe, because more subscribers is what every YouTuber wants. And I will see you in the next video. Until then, I'm Nariko Murakami. See ya!